February 19, 1934. A cold wind cuts across Cedar Grove Cemetery in New Bern, North Carolina as a coffin descends into frozen earth. The local newspaper will call him an honorary citizen, a Masonic Lodge member, a bank director. But they won't mention the devastating truth: Caleb Davis Bradham, the man who created Pepsi Cola, died penniless, working as a clerk in the very pharmacy he once owned. This isn't just a funeral. This is the final scene of one of history's most catastrophic financial collapses, a fortune worth billions today, sold for the price of a modest house. A decade before his death, in a courtroom blocks from this cemetery, a gavel fell. That sound marked the execution of an empire. Pepsi Cola Company's assets, 20 years of innovation, sweat, and ambition, were auctioned to Craven Holding Corporation for $30,000. In today's money, roughly $525,000. The price of a small apartment for a brand now worth over $230 billion. How does a visionary pharmacist build a global icon, only to watch it slip through his fingers? The answer lies not in competition or bad luck, but in one man's fatal miscalculation about a single commodity, sugar. To understand Bradham's obsession with control, we must start with his deepest wound. 1891, 24-year-old Caleb Bradham is studying medicine at the University of Maryland, dreaming of becoming a surgeon, status, respect, security. Then catastrophe strikes. His father, George Washington Bradham, declares bankruptcy. The family business collapses. There's no money for tuition. Young Caleb is forced to abandon his medical degree, returning home in shame to work as a schoolteacher, then a pharmacy clerk. This moment became the psychological foundation of everything that followed. A man destined to save lives with a scalpel now stood behind a counter selling pills. The gap between his ambitions and his reality created a burning need for redemption. He would never be dependent on anyone else's money again. He would build something so massive, so unshakable, that bankruptcy could never touch him. This fear would ultimately destroy him. In 1893, Bradham opened his own establishment, Bradham Drug Company, at the corner of Middle Street and Pollock Street in New Bern. Post-Civil War North Carolina was struggling, the old aristocracy fading as aggressive new entrepreneurs carved out territory. Bradham's pharmacy quickly became the social center of town, part apothecary, part gathering place, filled with the scent of medicinal herbs and vanilla. At the center of his store stood the apparatus that would change everything, a soda fountain. Bradham, the failed doctor, began listening to his customers' complaints. The same ailment came up repeatedly: dyspepsia, stomach disorders, heaviness after eating. The heavy Southern diet demanded a solution. Bradham saw his opportunity. He began experimenting, mixing compounds not in laboratory test tubes but in soda glasses. His recipe was calculated: cola nut extract, vanilla, rare oils, and crucially, pepsin, a digestive enzyme that breaks down proteins. Initially called Brad's Drink, it sounded provincial and small. Bradham's ambition stretched far beyond state borders. On August 28, 1898, he made the move that separates visionaries from craftsmen. He renamed it Pepsi Cola. The name directly referenced two active ingredients, pepsin and cola, a claim to medical functionality. In an era when cocaine and opium were still common in medicines, Bradham offered a healthy alternative. He wasn't selling pleasure. He was selling energy and digestion. His slogan read, "Energizes, strengthens, aids digestion." The price, 5 cents per glass. Luxury accessible even to the poor. By 1902, Pepsi Cola Company was officially registered. But Bradham needed more than a successful product, he needed social legitimacy. On January 1, 1901, he married Charity Cradle, a woman from a respected family whose name opened doors that remained closed to the son of a bankrupt. This wasn't just romance. This was a strategic merger of capital and status. The marriage transformed Bradham's position. He joined the North Carolina Naval Militia, rising to lieutenant commander. Photographs from this era show a stern man in a perfectly tailored uniform with golden epaulets, a visual metaphor for how he ran his business: strict hierarchy, discipline, expansion. By 1908, more than 250 franchises across the country were dispensing his drink. Money flowed like a river, and Bradham needed to materialize his success. His gaze fell on 2011 Johnson Street, the Slover Mansion. Built in 1848 by wealthy merchant Charles Slover, this neo-Renaissance brick palace survived the Civil War, housing General Ambrose Burnside's headquarters. By purchasing this house for $13,000, equivalent to 26 annual salaries of an ordinary worker, Bradham was buying history itself. He was telling New Bern, "Now I am the general here." The mansion became the Slover Bradham House on December 28, 1908. Its architecture worked for Bradham's image: heavy, massive brick, strict symmetry, windows resembling observation posts. This wasn't light Victorian styling but a fortress. Bradham installed modern technologies, electricity, telephone lines, into this old shell, merging the aristocratic past with industrial progress. Inside, the mansion was a map of Bradham's consciousness. Marble fireplaces, cold, heavy, eternal, contradicted the fluid, soluble nature of his syrup-based fortune. Heavy Victorian armchairs of mahogany and walnut screamed stability. This was architectural self-deception. Bradham tried to convince himself his empire was as solid as this walnut furniture, though it actually rested on stock exchange quotes. The dining room became the heart of his social strategy. Under a massive chandelier, North Carolina's elite gathered. Here they discussed politics, bank rates, the future of the South. In this crystal sparkle, Bradham lost touch with reality. When you drink wine in a hall resembling a museum, it's hard to believe the price of sugar can collapse your life in one day. The mansion had more than 10 main rooms, not counting servants' quarters. The total living area exceeded 4,000 square feet. For a family of several people, this was excessive. But functionality was never the main goal. The main goal was dominance. Bradham installed electricity throughout, one of the most expensive innovations of the time. Wires were hidden in century-old masonry. Light came on with the flick of a switch, a metaphor for his business. Instant results, the magic of technology. He believed he could manage the market as easily as turning on lights in his living room. But this grandeur embedded the first systemic failure. The house demanded constant cash flow, servants, receptions, repairs, European furniture. It became a black hole for capital. Bradham began withdrawing money from company operations to maintain this facade, mixing personal ambitions with corporate finances. He created perfect scenery for his life but forgot that scenery doesn't protect from earthquakes. By 1917, when America entered World War I, everything changed. The government introduced strict rationing. Sugar, the blood of Bradham's business, became scarce. For ordinary people, this meant fewer sweets. For Caleb Bradham, it meant his empire's heart stopping. Testimonies from this period paint a picture of transformation. Bradham became irritable, obsessed with commodity exchange reports. He spent less time with family, more behind closed office doors clutching telegraph tapes. Charity Cradle witnessed her husband's metamorphosis. The confident captain of industry became a man consumed by market fears. This is classic conflict. The man built a house for family happiness but now was ready to stake family well-being to save business. Pepsi Cola, his corporate child, began devouring his real children. Then came 1920. The war ended. Government control over sugar prices lifted. This should have brought relief. Instead, it brought chaos. The price of sugar, stable at 5 cents per pound for years, began vertical ascent. Speculators inflated prices, 9 cents, 15 cents, 20 cents. Here, Caleb Bradham made the fatal mistake that transformed him from businessman into tragic figure. He convinced himself prices would rise forever. The voice of panic echoed in his head: if I don't buy sugar now, tomorrow it will cost 50 cents and I'm ruined. This was casino logic, a gambler doubling bets while losing. In spring 1920, Bradham issued his death sentence. He began buying sugar futures on industrial scale. Not for months ahead, for years. He paid peak price, 22 cents per pound. 22 cents. Remember this figure. It became the epitaph on his fortune's grave. He stuffed warehouses to capacity, spending almost all free funds and worse, taking huge loans secured by personal property. At that moment, charity probably sent disaster, but in the patriarchal South, wives couldn't stop husbands who considered themselves financial geniuses. The moral ambivalence peaked in summer 1920. Bradham felt like a winner. He had sugar, his competitors didn't. He walked New Bern with his head high. But this was a feast during plague. He didn't notice the market was already oversaturated. Sugarcane harvests in Cuba and elsewhere turned out record-breaking. Global logistics recovered faster than analysts expected. The bubble prepared to burst. Imagine Bradham lying in darkness in his mansion bedroom, listening to his wife's breathing. He defeated the shortage, but inside grew cold premonition. He bet everything on one card. If the price fell even a cent, he'd lose millions. If it collapsed, he'd lose everything: the house, the bed, the respect of the woman beside him. He wanted to become independent from the market, but with his actions, he chained himself to it with bonds of debt obligations. He wanted to leave an empire to his children but instead prepared them an inheritance of bankruptcy. This wasn't just miscalculation. This was an error in values. He forgot the first rule of business: never risk what you cannot afford to lose. End of 1920, the world Bradham built began collapsing, not with a crash but a whisper. First came rumors on the New York Exchange, then telegrams from brokers, finally newspaper headlines screaming about market oversaturation. What followed, economists later called the sugar crash of 1920. For Bradham, it was falling into an abyss without safety net. The price peaked at 26 cents per pound in spring, then collapsed to 2 cents by December. Not a 10 or 20% drop, a 13-fold devaluation. The mathematics was murderously simple: Pepsi-Cola's warehouses stuffed with raw materials bought for millions now cost pennies. Every can of soda produced brought not profit but loss. The more they manufactured, the poorer they became. 1921 and 1922 became agony. Picture the atmosphere in the mansion on Johnson Street during those days. Servants probably sensed tension, seeing how the master paled over account books. The electric lights Bradham was so proud of now illuminated not triumph but despair. He tried restructuring debts, begging bankers, seeking investors. But when banks saw balance sheets listing sugar at 10 times market price, they slammed doors. Credit lines were cut. On May 31, 1923, the inevitable happened: Pepsi-Cola Company officially declared bankruptcy. This was the day the dream died legally. Then came the cruelest blow: company assets went to auction. The entire empire, patents, trademark, secret formula, equipment, factories. The buyer, Craven Holding Corporation. The price, $30,000. $30,000. Bradham spent almost half this amount just buying his house 15 years earlier. Now his life's work, a brand known in 24 states, sold for the price of good horses. At that moment, Caleb Bradham lost everything except honor and a roof over his head. And it's precisely here, at the point of absolute zero, that his true transformation begins. In stories of this scale, the hero after the crash often chooses the easy way: a bullet to the temple, a jump from a window. Public disgrace for a man of Southern aristocracy was unbearable. Everyone in New Bern knew about his fall. People who yesterday tipped hats today whispered behind his back. But Caleb Bradham performed an act requiring greater courage than suicide: he decided to live. He returned where he started, to the pharmacy. Imagine this scene: 1924, Bradham, 57 years old, former millionaire, former gubernatorial candidate, puts on a white coat and stands behind the counter of Bradham Drug Company. He begins mixing medicines again, selling aspirin and, by cruel irony, pouring soda for locals. But now it's not his soda. The brand belongs to others. He's just a hired worker in his own past. This was a moment of transcendence. If earlier his goal was power and expansion, now his goal became dignity. He didn't flee the city or hide in his mansion drawing curtains. He went out to people. He looked them in the eyes. And something amazing happened: the city didn't turn away. New Bern residents saw humanity in this fall. Bradham ceased being an unattainable magnate and became again Dr. Caleb, the man who knows the recipe for headaches. The mansion on Johnson Street also changed meaning. Previously a symbol of ambition, showcase of success, place for receiving senators, now it became a fortress protecting family from adversity. The house stopped being an asset and became just a home. Bradham preserved it, probably through legal subtleties of titling it in his wife's name or remnants of personal savings that didn't enter the bankruptcy estate. But maintaining such a giant became a burden. In winter, the family closed off rooms to save on coal. Grandeur gave way to pragmatism. The stucco on ceilings still reminded of glory days, but now witnessed modest dinners, not banquets. In these years, Bradham reconsidered wealth's concept. He lost money but preserved different influence. He remained bank board chairman, though without capital. He participated in Masonic lodge life. He helped organize student scholarships, the same situation he faced when his father went bankrupt. He closed his father's gestalt not through accumulating gold but through accepting fate. He realized the name Bradham meant something in Newbern not because of the bottling plant but because of how he held up under fate's blows. His wife Charity revealed herself in new light during this period. If during ascent years she was the ornament of his life, in collapse years she became his backbone. She didn't leave him or go to relatives. She accepted new reality with stoicism inherent to women of that time. Their marriage, entered a strategic alliance, passed the test of fire and became the union of two survivors. The crisis cleansed Bradham of vanity's chaff. He no longer chased future phantoms. He lived in the here and now. Every dollar earned at the pharmacy was real. Unlike paper millions that evaporated in 1920, these were tangible. He paid bills, greeted neighbors. He became a living monument to his own mistake, a monument inspiring respect, not pity. But the story doesn't end there. While Bradham mixed powders in his Newbern pharmacy, his creation Pepsi-Cola began living its own separate life. The new owners who bought the company for a song also couldn't lift it immediately. The brand passed from hand to hand, balanced on the brink of disappearance. It was even offered for sale to Coca-Cola, which arrogantly refused, committing one of the greatest mistakes in business history. Bradham watched this from afar. What was it like to see your name, written in your own handwriting on the logo, being resuscitated by other people? Did he feel jealousy or perhaps relief that this burden no longer weighed on his shoulders? By the beginning of the 1930s, Caleb's health began to fail. Years of stress, overwork, and possibly the bitterness of loss undermined his heart. He still returned every evening to the house on Johnson Street, climbed worn steps, passed by mirrors that remembered him young and rich. But now in the reflection he saw not a failed businessman but a man who had endured. He transformed his tragedy into a quiet lesson in humility. He didn't become the king of soda he dreamed of being. He remained simply a pharmacist from Newbern. And in this simplicity, there was more truth than in all the advertising slogans he had ever devised. February 19, 1934, Caleb Bradham's heart stopped. But the cruelest irony wasn't his death, it was what happened immediately after. Fate has perverted humor. The Great Depression, the catastrophe that should have buried America, became rocket fuel for the brand Bradham created and lost. While his body cooled in Cedar Grove Cemetery, new owners did what aristocratic Bradham never would, they devalued the product to save it. They sold 12-ounce bottles for 5 cents, twice as much for the same money. This slogan spread across impoverished America like wildfire. Pepsi became champagne for the unemployed, a symbol of small joy in despair's era. At the moment Bradham's family mourned, somewhere in New York, cash registers rang at unprecedented speed. The brand rose from the dead using Caleb's name, his font, his formula, but bringing not a cent to his heirs. This was posthumous identity theft on planetary scale. After Caleb's death, Charity and their children stayed in the mansion until 1973, almost 40 years living inside a monument to their lost empire. Huge halls with high ceilings designed for balls and receptions of senators now witnessed only quiet fading of an old lineage. Furniture bought for thousands of dollars at the beginning of the century aged, upholstery wore, but there was nothing to replace it. The mansion turned into a museum of unfulfilled hopes where every interior item screamed of past greatness. Living here meant waking up every day inside one's main mistake. It was not a house. It was a sarcophagus. The Bradham family kept a roof over their heads but became prisoners of their own history, guardians of an altar whose deity had long died. Today, when PepsiCo's capitalization exceeds $230 billion, Caleb Bradham's story reads like frightening prophecy for modern economy. We're accustomed to thinking people of the past were more naive than us, that they didn't know algorithms, risk hedging, technical analysis. But Bradham's crash is an absolute copy of modern financial bubbles. His purchase of futures at 22 cents per pound is classic FOMO, the same psychology making people buy Bitcoin at peak prices, mortgaging apartments. Bradham was the smartest man of his time, pharmacist, strategist. But facing greed and fear, his IQ zeroed out. Yet there's another legacy layer that can't be measured in money, the question of authorship and alienation. Today's Pepsi logo is a red-white-blue circle, an abstraction. But retro-style cans show that ornate font, Caleb's handwriting, his brush movement made in a pharmacy back room in 1898. Billions have seen this handwriting. It became part of humanity's visual code on par with the cross or crescent. Caleb Bradham achieved immortality, but this immortality became completely detached from his personality. He became a ghost in the corporate machine. No one drinking soda at stadiums or movie theaters knows about the Newbern tragedy, the warehouses of rotting sugar, the sleepless nights in the mansion office. The product devoured its creator, perhaps the most terrifying outcome for any creator. When your creation becomes so great that it no longer needs its father. If you visit Newbern today, you'll find a city that remembers. The Slover Bradham mansion stands restored, shining with the same red brick as a century ago, now a historical landmark where tourists photograph the Pepsi creator's home. The pharmacy at Middle and Pollock is a museum where you can buy souvenir bottles and stand where the soda fountain once stood. But to truly understand this story's finale, visit Cedar Grove Cemetery. Find the grave marked Caleb Davis Bradham. It's quiet there. The noise of the global corporation, clank of conveyor belts, ring of billions of dollars, all remained in another dimension. Here lies a man who lost the game called capitalism but won the game called humanity. His last years spent behind the pharmacy counter weren't a fall but an ascent. He showed dignity doesn't depend on stock quotes. He looked neighbors in the eye knowing they knew everything, and he didn't look away. In a world measuring success only by account zeros, Bradham's story reminds us there are things that cannot be bought and things that cannot be sold even at bankruptcy auction. Caleb Bradham's story isn't just a business case from textbooks. It's classical tragedy in 20th century setting, a reminder that between genius and madman, between visionary and bankrupt, lies a thin line, the width of just 1 cent in sugar's price. The next time you hear the characteristic sound of an opening can, remember, it's not just escaping gas. It's the sound with which empires collapse. It's the echo of the starter pistol in a race Caleb Bradham started but never finished. His fortune is destroyed. His mansion belongs to others. His grave is overgrown with grass. But the taste he invented to heal neighbors' stomachs now graces every tongue on the planet. Perhaps this is eternity's true price, to give everything, to remain just a word on a label, a ghost in a machine that conquered the world without you.